How do you punish a creature that cannot die? A being who can transform into 72 different animals or objects, who can leap 33,000 miles in a single bound, whose every hair can become a perfect clone of himself, armed and ready for battle. A warrior so powerful he declared war on heaven itself, and was winning. This creature would steal the secrets of immortality, not once but 5 different times, weaving them into his very soul until he was an eternal, indestructible force of nature. A force that would eventually be brought to its knees, not by a blade or a spell, but by a prison made of a single mountain. For 500 years, he would be trapped alone with nothing but the weight of his own arrogance. This is not the story of how a monkey became a god. This is the story of how a god became a prisoner, and how that prisoner began a journey that would change the very fabric of reality. To understand the fall, you must first understand the rise. And it all begins with a rock. On the peak of the mountain of flowers and fruit, a land of ancient pines and emerald cypresses, stood a single colossal stone. It was no ordinary boulder. Since the dawn of time, since the separation of chaos into heaven and earth, this stone had been absorbing the purest energies of the cosmos. It was nourished by the essence of the sun and the moon, bathed in the light of the stars, and infused with the divine breath of the world. For eons it sat silent and patient, until one day, the celestial energies within it reached their peak. The stone began to tremble, and with a crack that echoed through the valleys, it split open. From its stony womb emerged not a beast, not a spirit, but a fully formed stone monkey. The moment he was born, light shot from his eyes, piercing the clouds and startling the Jade Emperor on his celestial throne in heaven. The monkey bowed to the 4 cardinal directions, a sign of innate intelligence, a creature born of the universe itself. He was not like the other primates of the mountain. While they foraged and played, he explored. He befriended wolves, tigers, and leopards. He was fearless, curious, and possessed a charisma that drew the other monkeys to him. He became their leader, their friend, their king in all but name. One hot summer day, the monkeys sought refuge from the heat, playing in the spray of a magnificent waterfall that cascaded down the mountainside. One of them idly wondered, what lies behind that great curtain of water? Whoever is brave enough to pass through it and return unharmed, we shall make him our king. The challenge was laid. 3 times the call went out, and 3 times the monkeys hesitated, fearing the churning, powerful water. Then the stone monkey, his eyes glinting with excitement, shouted, "I will go." He took a running start, shut his eyes, and leaped straight through the waterfall. For a moment, there was nothing but the roaring sound of 1,000 tons of water. But then his eyes opened. He was in a vast hidden cavern. An iron bridge stretched over a rushing stream, leading to a sprawling grotto filled with stone tables, stone chairs, and stone beds. It was a home, a palace seemingly built by nature itself. On a stone tablet were carved the words, "The water curtain cave of the blessed land of the mountain of flowers and fruit." He had found paradise. Overjoyed, he leaped back through the waterfall and told the others what he had discovered. Awed by his courage and his discovery, the entire tribe of monkeys followed him into the cave. They bowed before him in unison, honoring their promise. From that day forward, the stone monkey was no longer just a monkey. He was the Meiho Wang, the handsome monkey king. For over 300 years, he reigned in perfect happiness. He led his people to feast on exotic fruits and fine wines, sleeping under the protection of the cave, free from the predators of the world. It was an idyllic life, a dynasty of joy and freedom. But eternity is a concept unknown to mortals, even one born of a magic stone. One day, during a great feast, the Monkey King suddenly grew somber and began to weep. His subjects gathered around him, concerned. "Your Majesty, why do you cry? We live in paradise." The king looked at them, his eyes filled with a new and terrible understanding. "Though we are happy now," he said, "I am filled with a dreadful premonition. Sooner or later we will grow old. We will face Yama, the king of hell. We will die, and our time in this beautiful world will be nothing but a forgotten dream. We are not free from the cycle of reincarnation. We are not truly immortal." For the first time in his life, the handsome Monkey King felt fear. The thought of death, of oblivion, became an obsession. He could not accept it. He, who was born of cosmic stone, could not be subject to the same frail end as a common beast. An elder monkey, wise in the ways of the world, spoke up. He told the king that there were 3 kinds of beings who had escaped the cycle of life and death: the Buddhas, the Immortals, and the Sages. They lived on distant continents, beyond the great oceans, and held the secrets to eternal life. A fire was lit in the Monkey King's heart. He would not wait for death to come for him. He would go out and find it, the secret to living forever. He announced his plan to his people. He would leave his kingdom, his throne, his paradise, and journey to the ends of the earth to find a master who could teach him the way. His subjects wept, begging him not to go, but his mind was made up. He built a simple raft, pushed it out into the sea, and with nothing but a bamboo pole, he set sail for the unknown. For years he drifted, guided by the winds and currents. He landed on the southern continent, the world of men. There, he learned to wear clothes, to speak their language, to walk among them. He saw them chase after fame and fortune, fighting and killing for things that would turn to dust. He realized they had no answers for him. They were just as trapped by mortality as he was. He continued his search for over a decade, wandering aimlessly, a strange, hairy figure seeking a truth no one seemed to possess. Finally, he came to a tall, beautiful mountain, wreathed in mist and an aura of profound peace. He heard a woodcutter singing a song not of worldly matters, but of the Tao, the fundamental nature of the universe. The Monkey King knew he was close. The woodcutter pointed him toward a cave deep in the forest, the home of a great immortal, the patriarch Subodhi. When the Monkey King arrived at the cave, the patriarch's disciple at first refused him entry, scoffing at the strange-looking creature. But the Monkey King was persistent. He knelt at the gate, refusing to move for days, then weeks, then months. Subodhi, aware of the monkey's unique origin, born of heaven and earth, finally relented and allowed him inside. The patriarch looked at the eager creature before him and asked for his name. The monkey explained he had no name. He was born of a stone. Subodhi thought for a moment. "You are like a monkey, a son, and your nature is that of a seeker. I will give you the name Wukong." Wu meaning awakened, and Kong meaning emptiness. From this day forward, you shall be known as Sun Wukong. He had a name. He had a master. He was no longer just a king of monkeys, but a disciple on the path to enlightenment. He spent the next 7 years at the temple, learning human etiquette, studying scriptures, and performing menial tasks, all the while waiting patiently for the real lessons to begin. He showed immense intelligence and a deep desire to learn. The patriarch saw the boundless potential within him, but also a dangerous, untamed spirit. Finally, the day came. Subodhi called Sun Wukong before him and offered to teach him one of the great arts. He offered him the path of magic, of alchemy, of quiet meditation. But Wukong had only one question for each path. Will it grant me true immortality? Will I live forever? Each time, the patriarch admitted that these paths, while powerful, would only prolong life, not grant true eternity. Wukong refused them all. His singular, obsessive focus on escaping death both frustrated and impressed his master. He was seeking the ultimate prize, and he would accept no substitutes. He had found the master who held the key to eternal life. He just didn't realize he was also forging the chains of his own eternal damnation. The training was about to begin. For the next 7 years, the Monkey King was known not as a king, but as a novice. He learned to speak and act like a human. He studied scripture, burned incense, and swept the floors of the temple. Every single day, he hauled firewood and fetched water from the well. He tended the gardens. He did everything the other students did, but he received no special instruction. The master, the great patriarch Subodhi, seemed to barely notice him. The other disciples, all human, would gather to hear the master's sermons on the nature of the Tao, the path to enlightenment. But when Sun Wukong tried to listen in, they would shoo him away, laughing. "Go on, monkey, back to your chores. This is beyond you." He endured the scorn. He endured the endless, repetitive work. Inside, a fire of ambition burned, but on the outside, he was the model of patience. He knew this was a test. He knew that the path to immortality wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon of the soul. He was proving he was more than just an animal driven by instinct. He was proving he had the discipline to wield the very powers of creation. Then one day, after 7 long years had passed, the patriarch gathered his disciples in the main hall. He took his seat on the high platform and asked, "What is it that you all wish to learn from me?" Sun Wukong, standing among the others, saw his chance. He stepped forward and bowed deeply. The master looked down at him. "You, what do you seek?" Wukong, his voice steady, replied, "Master, I have but one goal. I seek the secret to eternal life. I wish to escape the wheel of reincarnation and live forever." The patriarch smiled a strange, thin smile. He descended from his platform, holding a wooden ruler. He walked up to Sun Wukong and without warning smacked him hard on the head. "You insolent ape! You come here, do nothing but chop wood and sweep floors, and you have the audacity to ask for the greatest secret in the universe? Get out of my sight!" The other disciples gasped, then started snickering. Wukong didn't flinch. The master hit him a second time, then a third time. Wukong remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the master. The patriarch then turned his back, folded his hands behind him, and walked slowly back into his private chambers, sealing the door shut. The hall erupted in laughter. "The fool!" they whispered. "He finally angered the master. He's finished." They pointed and jeered as Wukong simply bowed to the closed door and returned to his duties, a faint, knowing smile on his face. The disciples saw a public humiliation, a final rejection. But Sun Wukong saw a secret message, a riddle hidden in plain sight. 3 raps on the head. That meant he was to present himself at the 3rd watch of the night, the darkest hour just after midnight. The master turning his back and folding his hands behind him, that meant he was to go to the back door of the temple. And walking into the private chambers and sealing the door, that meant he was to enter in secret so no one else would know. That night Wukong waited. He listened to the rhythmic breathing of the other sleeping students. When the time was right, he slipped out of the barracks like a shadow. He crept around to the back of the temple, his heart pounding not with fear, but with exhilaration. He found the rear door and to his relief it was slightly ajar. He slipped inside. The master, the patriarch Subodhi, was waiting for him, sitting on his bed, facing inward. "I knew you would understand," the old man said, without turning around. "You are no ordinary creature. You possess a spiritual intelligence that is rare in this world. Come closer." Since the others were too blind to see the message, the secret is yours and yours alone. In the flickering candlelight of that hidden room, the great master finally began the true lesson. He leaned in and whispered the sacred formulas, the secret rhymes and esoteric verses that unlocked the very source code of life itself. He taught Sun Wukong how to absorb the essence of the sun, the moon and the stars. He taught him how to refine his own energy, how to harmonize his body with the fundamental forces of the universe, and how to protect himself from the 3 calamities, bolts of heavenly lightning, plagues of cosmic fire, and gusts of soul-disintegrating wind, that were sent to destroy anyone who dared to defy their mortal fate. Sun Wukong was a genius. He absorbed the knowledge like a dry sponge in the ocean. What would take a human a century to comprehend, he mastered in a single night. He had done it. He had cheated death. He was now immortal. But the master wasn't finished. "Immortality is useless if you can be captured and contained," he said. "You will need other skills to protect your new gift." And so, he offered Wukong a choice between 2 disciplines of transformation: the 36 heavenly transformations, or the 72 earthly transformations. Wukong, ever the maximalist, chose the 72 earthly transformations, simply because it was the bigger number. For the next 3 years in secret he trained. He learned to change his shape at will. He could become a giant, with his head in the clouds and his feet on the floor of the sea. He could shrink down to the size of a single particle of dust, invisible to any eye. He could transform into a soaring eagle, a slithering snake, a roaring tiger, or a buzzing fly. He could even become an inanimate object, a temple, a rock, a tree. He had 72 different ways to become anything but himself. Finally, the master taught him one last technique. "Your movements are still bound by the earth," he said. "You need a way to travel." He taught Wukong the cloud somersault, a magical art of levitation. With a single leap, a single flip in the air, Sun Wukong could travel 108,000 li, a distance of nearly 34,000 miles. He could cross entire continents in a single bound. He could have breakfast at his mountain home and be in another hemisphere for lunch. He was no longer just a monkey. He was a force of nature, immortal, a master of disguise, a traveler of the heavens. He was perfect, and that was the problem. One summer afternoon, the other disciples were talking outside. Wukong, one of them called out, "We hear you've been getting secret lessons from the master. Is it true? Can you show us something?" For 10 years, Sun Wukong had practiced humility and patience. But now, with all this power bubbling inside him, his old arrogance, his pride, his desperate need to be admired, came roaring back to the surface. A wide grin spread across his face. "Sure," he said. "What do you want to see? They say you can transform. Can you turn into a tree?" "Easy," Wukong said. He muttered the magic words, shook his body, and in an instant, where the monkey once stood, there was a magnificent towering pine tree, perfect in every detail. The disciples gasped and applauded, shouting his name, their cheers echoing through the quiet monastery. And then a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Who is making all this noise?" It was the patriarch. He strode out, his face a mask of thunder. When he saw the pine tree that was once his student, his expression turned from anger to a deep, profound disappointment. "Wukong," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "change back." The pine tree shimmered and transformed back into the monkey, who was now trembling, the celebratory grin wiped clean from his face. He knew he had made a terrible mistake. "Come with me," the master ordered. He led Wukong away from the others. "Did I not teach you that these arts are to be kept secret? This is not a carnival trick to win applause. When you show off a power like this, what do you think happens? Another man sees it and he will want it. If you refuse to teach him, he will resent you, perhaps even try to kill you. You have put a target on your own back for a moment of cheap praise." Sun Wukong fell to his knees. "Master, forgive me. I was weak. I only wanted their approval." But the patriarch shook his head. "There is no forgiving this. The damage is done. You are no longer welcome here. You must leave. Immediately." Wukong's heart shattered. "Master, where can I go? This has been my home for 10 years. Go back to where you came from," the master said, his voice cold as stone. "But I have one final command for you, and you must swear on your immortal soul to obey it." He leaned in close, his eyes boring into Wukong's. "No matter what happens, no matter what chaos you cause or what trouble you find yourself in, and believe me, you will find yourself in more trouble than you can possibly imagine, you are to never ever, under any circumstances, tell anyone that you were my student. If you so much as breathe my name, I will know. And I will flay your ape skin from your bones, shatter your soul into a million pieces, and banish you to a place of eternal torment. Do you understand me?" Sun Wukong, tears streaming down his face, could only nod. He had it all. And in a single moment of pride, he had lost the only thing that truly mattered, his guide. He was cast out, sent back into the world, a weapon of unimaginable power with no one left to teach him how to control it. He took to the sky, a golden blur heading for home, leaving behind the only master he would ever know. He was an immortal god now, but he was also a ticking time bomb, and the fuse had just been lit. The journey home was a blur of cloud and wind. For a mortal, it would have taken a decade. For Sun Wukong, it took less than an hour. He didn't sail or walk, he tore a straight line through the sky, a golden comet burning with impatience. He landed not with a gentle touch, but like a meteorite, cracking the earth at the base of his home, the mountain of flowers and fruit. But the joyous cries he expected were absent. The air, once thick with the scent of ripe peaches and the sound of chattering monkeys, was stale with silence and fear. His subjects, his children, were gaunt and terrified. They huddled in caves, their fur matted with grime. When they saw him, they didn't cheer. They wept. They told him a story of a monster, a self-proclaimed demon of havoc, who had moved into their mountain while Wukong was away. This demon had enslaved them, stolen their food, and taken their children to be his servants. Fury, cold and absolute, replaced the joy in Wukong's heart. He had just become a god, an immortal who had mastered the secrets of the universe. And some third-rate bully thought he could turn his kingdom into a personal labor camp? Wukong found the demon's lair, a dark and stinking cave that was once the sacred waterfall grotto. The demon was a hulking brute, all tusks and knotted muscle, feasting on stolen fruit. He laughed when he saw Wukong, dismissing him as just another monkey. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Wukong didn't even bother with a proper stance. He simply used the skills his master had forbidden him from showing off. He plucked a single hair from his arm, chewed it into pieces and spat them out. In an instant 100 Sun Wukong stood behind him, each one an exact snarling copy. The demon of havoc swung his massive broadsword. The army of Wukong swarmed him, a tidal wave of fists and feet. They bit, they scratched, they pulled, they overwhelmed. The real Wukong meanwhile simply walked up, snatched the demon's own sword from his hand, and with a single contemptuous swing, ended the creature's reign of terror. He didn't even break a sweat. He had restored his kingdom, but the victory felt hollow. He had used a common mortal weapon, felt beneath him. He was a king, an immortal king. He needed a weapon fit for a god. He established a proper army, training his monkeys in the arts of war, but he himself remained unarmed. He could shatter mountains with his bare hands, but that was brute force. He needed something with finesse, something legendary. One of the old gibbons, his wisest advisor, told him that the very water that flowed through their grotto was connected to the underwater palace of Aogwang, the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. A place, he said, where divine weapons were as common as seashells. Wukong didn't hesitate. He performed a magical incantation to part the waters and simply walked down the riverbed, the immense pressure of the deep sea meaning nothing to his immortal body. He strode into the Dragon King's magnificent palace of coral and pearl as if he owned the place. Guards tried to stop him, but he swatted them away like flies. He found the ancient Dragon King on his throne and made his demand, not a request. "Neighbor," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, "I'm in need of a weapon. Surely you have one to spare." The Dragon King, an ancient and powerful being, was taken aback by this rude, dripping monkey. To humor him, and to get him out of his court, he ordered his finest weapons brought forth. First, a massive 9-pronged spear weighing over 3,000 pounds. Wukong picked it up, swung it around like a child's toy, and tossed it aside. "Too light," he declared. Annoyed, the Dragon King had them bring out a gigantic halberd, a weapon so heavy it took a dozen shrimp soldiers and crab generals to carry. It weighed over 7,000 pounds. Wukong spun it like a baton and scoffed. "Still too light. It's flimsy." The Dragon King was now sweating. He had nothing heavier. His entire armory was being dismissed by this upstart. It was then that the Dragon Queen, hoping to end the embarrassing affair, mentioned a legend. A piece of divine iron sitting in their treasury, a great pillar left behind by the ancient gods. It was used by the Great Yu, a legendary hero, to measure the depths of the primordial floods that once covered the world. Since then it had just been sitting there, a useless, immovable relic that occasionally emitted a strange, heavenly light. Wukong's eyes lit up. He demanded to see it. They led him to the treasury, and there it was, a colossal pillar of black iron, 20 feet high and as thick as a barrel, its ends capped with golden hoops. It radiated an aura of immense power. While the Dragon King saw a useless piece of cosmic scrap metal, Wukong saw his destiny. He walked up and stroked it. The pillar hummed in response. "It's a fine pillar," Wukong said, "but it's a bit too thick." As he spoke the words, the pillar instantly shrank, becoming several feet thinner. The Dragon King's jaw dropped. Wukong circled it, a wide grin spreading across his face. And a little too long. As if obeying his thought, the pillar shrank again, down to a manageable 8-foot staff. Wukong lifted it. Felt perfect. It weighed 13,500 caddies, nearly 18,000 pounds. A weight that would crush a lesser god, but in his hands it felt as natural as his own arm. This was the Ruijingu Bang, the Azul golden-hooped cudgel, a weapon that could shrink to the size of a needle to be tucked behind his ear, or grow large enough to prop up the heavens. He spun it, and the very waters of the sea palace churned into a vortex. The pillars of the throne room cracked under the force of the wind. The guards were blown away. The Dragon King and his court trembled in fear. This monkey hadn't just taken a weapon. He had claimed a piece of the cosmos itself. But Wukong wasn't done. Now that he had the perfect weapon, he looked down at his simple monkey fur and frowned. "A great weapon deserves a great suit of armor," he announced. "Since we're such good neighbors, I'm sure you wouldn't mind helping me out." He wasn't asking. He was threatening. Terrified, the Dragon King had no choice. He summoned his brothers, the Dragon Kings of the southern, western, and northern seas. Bullied and intimidated by Wukong and his new cosmic cudgel, they gifted him a full set of divine battle regalia. A suit of golden chainmail, cloud-stepping boots made from lotus root fiber, and a magnificent phoenix feather cap. Clad in shimmering gold, wielding an artifact of creation, Sun Wukong was no longer just an immortal monkey. He was a warrior god, a vision of terrifying splendor. He laughed, thanked the pale-faced Dragon Kings for their gifts, and soared out of the sea palace, leaving a trail of destruction and utter humiliation in his wake. As he flew back to his mountain, a fully armed, invincible king, the 4 Dragon Kings seethed with rage. This was an insult that could not be borne. They immediately drafted a formal complaint, a celestial lawsuit, and sent it rocketing towards its destination. The cloud-draped peaks of heaven, and the throne of the most powerful being in the universe, the great Jade Emperor himself. The ticking bomb hadn't just gone off, it had taken out a city block, and the authorities had just been notified. The report landed on the Jade Emperor's desk with a thud that echoed through the silent, cavernous halls of the Cloud Palace. It wasn't a single report, it was a stack. First, a frantic plea from the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, detailing the theft of a legendary weapon by a demonic monkey. The ink was practically still wet, smeared with what looked suspiciously like tears. Beneath that, a far more chilling dispatch from the 10 kings of the underworld. The ledgers of life and death had been vandalized. An entire species, monkeys, had been forcibly removed from the cycle of reincarnation, their names struck from the books with crude, angry strokes of ink. The Jade Emperor, ruler of the cosmos, august and eternal, read the documents. He didn't rage. He didn't thunder. He simply sat, his expression unreadable, as the celestial court around him erupted into a panicked murmur. A creature of unknown origin had, in the span of a few days, bullied a god, terrorized the afterlife, and broken one of the fundamental laws of reality. This wasn't just a crime. It was a cosmic middle finger. "We must dispatch the celestial army," bellowed a general, his armor clanking. "Surround his mountain. Eradicate this beast before he gets any more ambitious." "Annihilation is the only answer," another agreed. "Make an example of him." The calls for war grew louder, a chorus of divine outrage. But then a calm, measured voice cut through the noise. It belonged to Tai Bai Jinxing, the spirit of the planet Venus, an old wise advisor with a long white beard and an even longer memory. He stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice a soothing balm on the inflamed court. "This monkey is a product of heaven and earth, nourished by the sun and moon. He has achieved immortality and incredible power. To send an army against him now, without knowing the full extent of his abilities, is unwise. We might win, but the cost could be great. And what if we don't? What message does that send?" The Emperor stroked his long beard, considering. The old spirit had a point. A failed military campaign would be a galactic-level embarrassment. "What do you propose, Old Star?" the Emperor asked. "I propose a different strategy," Tai Bai said. "This monkey has power, but he has no rank. He's a king on a tiny island, a big fish in a small pond. He has no concept of the celestial order. He acts this way because he knows no better. It's like a kid who just discovered he can bench press a car. He's going to show off." A few of the gods chuckled nervously. "So," Tai Bai continued, "instead of crushing him, let's co-opt him. Let's offer him a place here in heaven. Give him an official title, a uniform, a salary. Make him part of the system. All this destructive energy, this ambition, let's channel it. Give him a job to do, something to keep him busy, and he'll be too preoccupied to cause any more trouble. We can bring him here, under our watch, where we can observe him and decide on a more permanent solution." It was a brilliant piece of political maneuvering, a classic case of keeping your friends close and your cosmic-level security threats closer. The Jade Emperor saw the wisdom in it. It was clean, efficient, and avoided any messy, unpredictable warfare. "Very well," the Emperor declared. "You, Tai Bai Jinxing, will be my envoy. Go to the Flower Fruit Mountain and extend our gracious invitation to this Sun Wukong. Summon him to heaven to receive his official appointment." And so the old star descended from the clouds, a golden decree in hand, and floated down to the bustling, chaotic paradise of Flower Fruit Mountain. Wukong, lounging on his throne, was immediately suspicious. He saw the celestial envoy approaching and ordered his monkey army to prepare for battle. But Tai Bai was all smiles and diplomacy. "Great king," he called out, "I come in peace. I bring good tidings from the celestial emperor himself." Wukong narrowed his eyes. "Good tidings? Your boss just found out I wrecked his neighbor's house and set fire to the county records office. I doubt he's sending me a fruit basket." "On the contrary," the old star beamed, "the Jade Emperor has heard of your great power and virtue. He feels that a talent like yours is wasted here, ruling over a small mountain. He wishes to offer you a position in the celestial government, a place among the gods." Wukong's ears perked up. A place among the gods? An official title? This was everything his ego craved. It was validation on a cosmic scale. To go from a stone monkey to a heavenly official? It was the ultimate promotion. His chest puffed out. "All right, old man," Wukong said, trying to sound casual. "What kind of position are we talking about? Head of celestial security? Grand Marshal of the heavenly armies?" "All in due time," Tai Bai said smoothly. "First, you must come to the Cloud Palace and be presented to His Majesty." That was all Wukong needed to hear. He told his monkeys to stand down, promising he'd be back soon with incredible stories and heavenly promotions for all of them. Then with a leap he somersaulted onto a cloud and followed the old star up through the 9 layers of the sky. He'd seen grand things, but nothing prepared him for heaven. Gates of pearl and jade, towers that pierced the clouds, rivers of starlight, and gardens where phoenixes nested. Gods and immortals walked the golden streets, their robes shimmering with divine light. It was clean, it was orderly, it was perfect. And Sun Wukong, the wild, untamed monkey, was about to become a part of it. He was led into the grand throne room, a space so vast it seemed to contain its own constellations. There, high on a throne of pure energy, sat the Jade Emperor. Wukong, for the first time in his life, felt a flicker of something resembling awe. He didn't bow, of course, that wasn't his style, but he stood and waited. The Emperor looked down at the strange, hairy creature before him. "So you are the stone monkey, Sun Wukong." "That's me," Wukong said, grinning. "Ready for my big shot job." The Emperor conferred with his ministers. "Which department has a vacancy?" he asked, his voice booming. An official stepped forward. "Your Majesty, every department is fully staffed, except one. There is an opening in the Imperial stables." The Emperor nodded. "Excellent. Sun Wukong, for your great abilities we bestow upon you an official title. From this day forward you shall be known as the Baimawen, protector of the heavenly horses." Baimawen. It sounded important. Protector. That had a nice ring to it. Wukong beamed, thanked the Emperor, and was immediately escorted to his new post. The Imperial stables were magnificent, filled with celestial steeds known as cloud-stepping dragons. They were incredible creatures, and Wukong, for all his bluster, had a way with animals. He took to his new job with surprising enthusiasm. He wasn't just a stable boy. He was the best stable boy. He made sure the horses were perfectly fed, groomed, and exercised. Under his care, they grew stronger, faster, and more radiant than ever before. For 2 weeks he was perfectly content. He was an official. He had a purpose. He was Baimawen. Then one day his subordinates held a welcoming feast for him. As the heavenly wine flowed, Wukong asked them, "This title, Baimawen, what's the rank? How high up am I?" The other officials looked at each other, snickering into their cups. "Rank?" One of them finally slurred. "There's no rank." "What do you mean, no rank?" Wukong asked, his smile faltering. "It's the lowest job there is," the official laughed. "It's an unclassified position. We give it to people just to have a spot for them. The name, Baimawen, is literally a folk charm farmers use to keep sickness away from their horses. You're not a protector. You're a glorified stable hand, a groom, a pooper scooper." The laughter echoed in Wukong's ears. The realization crashed over him like a tidal wave of ice. They weren't honoring him. They were mocking him. They hadn't seen a powerful immortal worthy of respect. They had seen a wild animal and given him a menial job to keep him out of trouble, like giving a toddler a set of keys to jangle. The entire grand invitation, the fancy title, the celestial appointment, it was all a joke. An insult of the highest order. The wine cup in his hand shattered into dust. The air in the room went cold. The laughter died in the officials' throats as they saw the look on his face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated, cosmic-level fury. He didn't scream. He didn't shout. He just whispered, his voice dangerously low. "So that's how it is." With a single explosive motion, he flipped the banquet table, sending food and wine flying. He pulled his golden-banded cudgel from his ear, and it grew to the size of a battering ram. He smashed the stables to splinters, sending the divine horses scattering in terror. He beat down the celestial guards who tried to stop him, leaving them in a bruised and broken heap. He fought his way to the southern gate of heaven, the main exit, and stormed out, a hurricane of rage. He flew straight back down to Flower Fruit Mountain, leaving a trail of chaos and disbelief in his wake. When he landed, his monkey subjects swarmed him, asking about his new life as a god. He stood before them, his eyes burning with humiliation and rage, and made a new proclamation. "They offered me the lowest job in existence," he roared, his voice shaking the entire mountain. "If heaven will not grant me a title worthy of my power, then I will grant one to myself. From this day forward, I am no longer just the Monkey King. I am Qitian Dasheng, the great sage, equal to heaven." And on the highest peak of Flower Fruit Mountain, he raised a new banner, a declaration of war against the entire celestial order, written in giant, defiant characters for all the gods to see. The great sage equal to heaven. The appeasement had failed. The joke had backfired, and the monkey they tried to tame was now claiming to be their equal. In the silent golden halls of the celestial court, that claim was met not with laughter, but with a cold, simmering rage. The Jade Emperor, ruler of the cosmos, sat upon his throne, his face a mask of thunder. The gods and immortals assembled before him murmured, their disbelief turning to outrage. A monkey, a creature born of stone, who had stolen the secrets of immortality and the treasures of the Dragon King, now had the audacity to declare himself their peer. The title Great Sage, equal to heaven, was more than an insult. It was a declaration of war. It was a challenge to the very structure of the universe. The Emperor demanded action. He turned to his celestial generals, the 4 heavenly kings, and the mighty Li Jing, the pagoda-bearing heavenly king. He ordered them to assemble their armies, to descend upon the mountain of flowers and fruit, and to capture this insolent primate. This time there would be no negotiation, no placating titles. There would only be subjugation. Li Jing accepted the command, his son, the formidable Prince Neza, stepping forward to volunteer as the vanguard. Neza was a god of war, a being of immense power who had been born into battle. He wielded the universe ring and the fire-tipped spear, and he rode upon the wind and fire wheels. Surely, he would be more than a match for a mere monkey. Down below, on the mountain of flowers and fruit, Sun Wukong was holding a feast. He sat on his new throne, surrounded by his monkey subjects, regaling them with tales of heaven's foolishness. He had shown them. He had forced their hand. He was no stable boy. He was their equal. When his scouts reported the approach of a vast, glittering army descending from the clouds, Wukong didn't panic. He laughed. He had been waiting for this. This was not a threat. It was an audience for his greatness. He grabbed his golden hooped rod, twirled it until it was the size of a needle, and tucked it behind his ear. "Stay here and enjoy the feast," he told his people. "Your king is going out to deal with some uninvited guests." He shot into the sky like a golden meteor, meeting the celestial army head-on. There in the vanguard was Prince Neza, a figure of blazing divine anger. The 2 warriors faced each other, suspended between the clouds and the earth. Neza sneered, demanding Wukong surrender and beg for the Emperor's mercy. Wukong simply grinned, pulling the staff from his ear and letting it grow to its colossal fighting size. Words were useless now. Neza attacked, a whirlwind of fire and steel. He was impossibly fast, his spear striking like lightning. But Wukong was faster. He was a phantom, a blur of motion, his staff a black whirlwind that deflected every blow. The clash of their weapons sent shockwaves through the heavens. Neza, in a display of divine power, transformed. He grew 2 more heads and 4 more arms, wielding a different magical weapon in each of his 6 hands, a demon-slaying sword, a scimitar, a binding rope, a demon-subduing club, a brick, and his fire-tipped spear. He was a one-god army, a terrifying spectacle of celestial might. Any other demon would have been annihilated. But Sun Wukong was not any other demon. Seeing Nez's transformation, he simply chuckled. "A neat little trick," he said. "Let me show you mine." And with a great shout, Wukong also transformed, growing 2 more heads and 4 more arms, his single iron rod multiplying into 3, 1 for each pair of hands. The battle that followed was legendary. It was a storm of divine power, a chaotic dance of blades and staves that made the very sky tremble. But for all of Nez's skill and divine weaponry, he could not land a single decisive blow. Wukong was his equal in every way, and in some ways his superior. He fought with a wild, unpredictable ferocity that the disciplined god of war couldn't counter. Finally, with a perfectly timed strike, Wukong brought his staff down hard on Nez's shoulder, sending the young god reeling back in pain and shock. Defeated, Neza retreated, his army falling into disarray. Sun Wukong stood alone in the sky, victorious. He hadn't just defeated a prince of heaven. He had single-handedly routed an entire celestial legion. He returned to his mountain a hero, his legend growing with every passing moment. Back in heaven, the news of Nez's defeat was met with stunned silence. They had sent one of their best and he had failed. The Jade Emperor's anger was now mixed with a sliver of fear. This monkey was more powerful than they could have ever imagined. The court was divided. Some argued for a second, larger assault, while others, remembering the chaos he had caused before, suggested they try appeasement one more time. Perhaps, they reasoned, if they just gave him the empty title he craved, he would be satisfied. And so, a celestial messenger was once again dispatched. This time the offer was real. The Jade Emperor would officially recognize his title, Great Sage equal to heaven. He would be given a grand residence in the celestial realm and a position with no actual duties, no power, and no salary, but a position nonetheless. It was a way to save face, to bring the rebel into the fold where they could keep an eye on him. Wukong, ever the egotist, accepted. He had won. They had bent the knee. He ascended to heaven once more, not as a lowly stable hand, but as a great sage. He was given a beautiful mansion and 2 servants to attend to his needs. For a while he was content. He wandered the celestial bureaucracy, making friends with other gods and immortals, enjoying the respect his new title afforded him. But Sun Wukong was a creature of chaos and action. An eternity of idle leisure was not paradise. It was a prison. He soon grew bored. And a bored Sun Wukong was a dangerous Sun Wukong. He noticed that while the other gods had jobs and responsibilities, he had none. He was a celebrity with no portfolio. He was a king with no kingdom. He began to suspect that his grand title was just an empty gesture, another way to keep him contained. His suspicions were confirmed when the Queen Mother of the West prepared her legendary Peach Festival, a grand banquet held only once every several thousand years. The peaches grown in her garden granted immortality, and invitations to the feast were the highest honor in the celestial realm. Every important deity was invited. Everyone. Except the great sage equal to heaven. When Wukong found out he'd been snubbed, his boredom curdled into a furious, burning rage. It was the ultimate insult. They still saw him as a joke, an outsider, an animal they were humoring. He decided then and there that if he wasn't invited to the party, he would crash it. Using his magic, he put the servants meant to invite the guests to sleep. He then transformed into one of them and flew to the Jade Pond where the banquet was being prepared. The sight was breathtaking. Tables laden with dragon liver, phoenix marrow, and bear paws. And at the center of it all, the legendary peaches of immortality. Wukong couldn't resist. He ate his fill of the divine food and, more importantly, drank vast quantities of the Jade Emperor's finest immortal wine. Drunk and emboldened, he stumbled out of the banquet hall and, by mistake, found his way into the alchemy labs of the supreme Taoist sage Laozi. There, Laozi had been refining his greatest creation, the pills of immortality. 5 gourds full of them. Seeing the golden pills, Wukong thought they were snacks left out for him. He gobbled them down like peanuts. In a single afternoon, Sun Wukong had consumed the peaches of immortality, the finest wine of heaven, and the most powerful alchemical pills in all of existence. The raw, cosmic power coursing through his veins was unimaginable. He was now, quite possibly, the single most indestructible being in the universe. Realizing what he had done, and that the consequences would be severe, he knew he couldn't stay. He fled the celestial realm, returning to his mountain kingdom a changed monkey. He was no longer just a powerful warrior. He was a living cataclysm, a vessel of stolen divinity. When the Jade Emperor discovered the trashed banquet, the missing peaches, the empty wine vats, and the stolen pills of immortality, his fury was absolute. This was no longer about an insulting title. This was a crime against the cosmic order itself. Every resource of heaven was now mobilized. He called upon his nephew, the true god of war, the illustrious sage Erlang Shan. Erlang was a warrior unlike any other, a demigod of immense power, with a third eye in the center of his forehead that could see through all illusion and deception. He was heaven's ultimate weapon. He descended to the mountain of flowers and fruit with his own elite force and his faithful celestial hound. The battle that ensued was on a completely different scale. Wukong and Erlang were perfectly matched. Their skills were equal, their powers a mirror of each other. The true test came in their mastery of the 72 transformations. Their duel became a spectacular, shape-shifting chase across the land and sky. Wukong transformed into a sparrow. Erlang instantly became a sparrowhawk. Wukong dove into a river and became a fish. Erlang became a cormorant to snatch him from the water. Wukong became a water snake. Erlang became a stork. Each transformation was met with a perfect counter. They were two sides of the same coin, an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. The battle raged, a stalemate of cosmic proportions. It seemed neither could gain the upper hand. But the gods of heaven were watching from above, and they were not interested in a fair fight. They just wanted the monkey captured. As the two warriors battled, the great sage Laozi, seeing an opening, took his diamond jade bracelet, a powerful celestial weapon, and hurled it from the heavens. The bracelet struck Wukong squarely on the head. Stunned and disoriented, the Monkey King stumbled. It was only for a moment, but a moment was all Erlang Shan's celestial hound needed. The dog lunged, sinking its teeth into Wukong's leg, bringing the great sage crashing to the ground. The celestial army swarmed him, binding him in chains that could hold a dragon. The rebellion was over. The great sage, equal to heaven, had finally been captured. And now, he would face the judgment of a furious and vengeful god. Dragged before the celestial throne, Sun Wukong, the great sage, equal to heaven, was no longer a king on a mountain of flowers and fruit. He was a prisoner, bound in chains forged from the hearts of dying stars, his immortal body held fast for the first time in centuries. The Jade Emperor looked down from his throne, his face a mask of cold fury. The court was silent, a vast assembly of gods, spirits, and immortals, all watching the final act of this audacious rebellion. The charges were read, a litany of cosmic crimes: stealing from the royal wine cellars, devouring the peaches of immortality, swallowing Laozi's pills of elixir, resisting heavenly arrest, and waging war against the celestial realm. Wukong just sneered. He had done it all, and he'd do it again. The verdict was swift, the sentence absolute: execution. He was taken to the celestial execution grounds. The god of thunder himself held the axe, a weapon that could cleave a mountain in two. The celestial army stood guard, their spears like a forest of steel. Wukong was forced to his knees, his head placed upon the block. The axe swung down, a blur of golden light and divine energy, aimed to sever his immortal head from his immortal body. It shattered. The axe blade exploded into 1,000 glittering shards, clattering uselessly on the ground. The god of thunder stared at the splintered handle in his hands, then at the Monkey King, who simply rolled his eyes, a faint smirk playing on his lips. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled gods. They brought a sword, a blade so sharp it could cut a beam of light. It swung and it bent, wrapping around Wukong's neck like a cheap piece of tin. Panic began to creep into the celestial ranks. This wasn't just an execution. It was a test of heaven's power, and heaven was failing spectacularly. They brought forth spears, pikes, and halberds, each one blunted, bent, or broke against his skin. His body, forged by the elements, nourished by divine fruit, and fortified by the pills of eternal life, was simply indestructible. He was less a creature of flesh and blood and more a living concept of pure, unyielding defiance. The Jade Emperor ordered the god of fire to burn him. A column of celestial flame, hot enough to melt souls, engulfed the Monkey King. When the fire died down, Wukong stood there, completely unsinged, merely dusting a bit of soot from his shoulder and complaining about the heat. They called upon the god of thunder to strike him with a bolt of heavenly lightning. The bolt struck with a crack that shook the foundations of heaven. Wukong staggered for a moment, shook his head as if to clear it, and then grinned, his fur crackling with static electricity. He actually seemed to enjoy it. The gods were at a loss. Their ultimate weapons, their most terrifying punishments, were nothing more than an afternoon's entertainment for this stone monkey. Humiliation turned to fear. If they couldn't kill him, what could they do? How could the celestial order stand if its greatest rebel was immune to its ultimate sanction? It was then that a new figure stepped forward from the crowd. It was the ancient Taishang Laojun, or Laozi, the supreme Taoist patriarch, the grand alchemist of the heavens. He was ancient beyond measure, his wisdom as deep as the cosmos itself. He bowed to the Jade Emperor. He explained that the Monkey King had consumed so many divine treasures that his body was now like a single massive diamond of fused immortal energy. Ordinary weapons and elements could no longer harm him. But Laozi offered he had a solution. He possessed an artifact of immense power, the crucible of 8 trigrams. This was no ordinary furnace. It was a divine instrument used to refine the very building blocks of reality, a crucible where elixirs were perfected and cosmic forces were tamed. He proposed they place the Monkey King inside. The samadhi fire within the crucible, an esoteric flame far more potent than any normal fire, would not only bypass Wukong's immunities but would slowly, painstakingly, melt him down, separating the stolen elixirs from his essence and reducing his body to its original mortal components. It would not just kill him, it would unmake him. The Jade Emperor agreed immediately. It was a perfect solution. They would destroy the rebel and reclaim the stolen power in one fell swoop. Sun Wukong was unbound and, with a great heave from several divine guards, was cast into the dark mouth of the crucible. The heavy lid, etched with the 8 trigrams representing all of reality, was slammed shut and sealed. Laozi himself stoked the flames, chanting ancient incantations as the divine fire roared to life. For 49 days the crucible would burn. For 49 days heaven waited, confident that their problem was finally being reduced to ash. Inside it was an inferno beyond all imagination. The samadhi fire was a living thing, a relentless, searing agony that sought to dissolve his very being. Wukong screamed, he raged, he pounded against the unyielding walls. But then, through the blinding pain, his mind sharpened. He remembered the crucible's design. The 8 trigrams represented the 8 fundamental elements and directions. But he knew there was a flaw, a space between 2 of the trigrams, the position of wind where the smoke had to escape. It was the crucible's one weak point. He scrambled into that corner, pressing himself into the small space. While the divine flames raged around him, licking at his body, the smoke billowed directly into his face. It was a searing, acrid smoke, born from the burning of cosmic essences. For 49 days, he huddled in that corner, enduring the unimaginable heat and the relentless choking smoke. But something incredible was happening. The fire wasn't destroying him, it was forging him. The intense heat was acting like a divine blast furnace, taking all the chaotic, potent energies he had consumed, the peaches, the wine, the pills, and instead of burning them out, it was refining them, tempering them, fusing them permanently and irrevocably into his body. His invulnerability was being hammered into something even greater. And the smoke was changing his eyes. For 49 agonizing days, it seared his pupils, burning away their mortal limitations. The pain was excruciating, but when it was over, his eyes were no longer normal. They were now the Huayan Jinjing, the fiery eyes of golden gaze. This baptism of fire had granted him a new, terrible power, the ability to see through any illusion, any disguise, any deception. He could now perceive evil in any form, wherever it hid. The crucible had failed to destroy him. It had only made him stronger. On the 49th day, the celestial court gathered. Laozi, confident in his work, approached the furnace. The fires were extinguished. The moment of triumph was at hand. He unsealed the lid and lifted it, expecting to find nothing but a pile of cinders and reclaimed elixir. The crucible exploded. With a roar that dwarfed thunder, Sun Wukong burst forth, a living cannonball of pure, concentrated rage. He was no longer just a rebel king. He was a demigod of vengeance, his body glowing with refined power, and his eyes burned with a terrifying golden light. He had survived. He had been reborn in the heart of heaven's own fire. He ripped his golden-hooped rod from his ear, and it grew to the size of a battering ram. He didn't just escape. He declared a new war. He smashed the crucible of 8 trigrams to pieces, sending the great lousy tumbling head over heels. He then turned his fiery gaze upon the celestial court, and the gods who had been so confident moments before, felt a primal fear they had not known for millennia. This was not the same monkey they had captured. This was something more. He moved like a blur, a whirlwind of golden fur and righteous fury. He shattered the halls of heaven, toppling celestial architecture with single swings of his staff. The heavenly guards, the same army that had overwhelmed him before, were now scattered like toys. He fought his way through the divine generals, the star lords, and the heavenly ministers, leaving a trail of chaos and terror in his wake. No one could stop him. No one could even slow him down. His goal was singular: the throne room. He was no longer content with being equal to heaven. Now he wanted to rule it. He crashed through the final gates, his golden eyes locking onto the Jade Emperor, who was now cowering behind his throne. The entire celestial government was in ruins, its greatest warriors defeated, its ultimate punishments proven useless. Heaven had thrown everything it had at the Monkey King, and it had only made him an unstoppable force of nature. Seeing the apocalypse in monkey form striding towards him, the Jade Emperor did the only thing he could. He sent a desperate prayer, a psychic scream that echoed across dimensions, across the fabric of reality itself. He sent it west to a realm of peace and enlightenment, calling out for the one being in all of existence who might be able to put an end to this madness. He called upon the Buddha. From the western paradise, a golden light bloomed, a radiance so pure and absolute it made the celestial fires of heaven look like flickering candle flames. It wasn't a light that traveled. It was a light that simply was. One moment, the grand hall was filled with the cacophony of battle and the Monkey King's defiant laughter. The next, a profound, impossible silence fell over everything. Every god, every soldier, every celestial being felt it, a stillness that soaked into their very bones, quieting the fear in their hearts. And there, standing before the throne, was the Buddha. He hadn't walked in. He hadn't flown. He simply existed where he hadn't a moment before. He was immense yet occupied no space. His presence was a paradox, a perfect calm at the heart of a cosmic storm. Sun Wukong, who had been single-handedly dismantling the armies of heaven, stopped mid-swing. The arrogance on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. He looked at this serene figure, this being who commanded authority not through force, but through an utter lack of it. The Buddha's voice was not loud, but it filled the universe. "Great sage," he said, the title a gentle acknowledgement, not a mockery. "Why do you wage war upon this heavenly court?" Wukong puffed out his chest, his bravado returning like a tidal wave. "This was just another old master to be beaten. Who are you to question me? I am Sun Wukong. I have mastered the 72 earthly transformations. I can ride the clouds. I can leap 108,000 li in a single bound. I am immortal, indestructible. The Jade Emperor has sat on that throne long enough. He's old, he's weak. It's time for a new ruler, and that ruler is me. Tell him to pack his bags and get out, and I'll let this whole thing slide." The Buddha simply smiled, a smile that held the wisdom of ages. "So you believe your power entitles you to the throne? Of course it does. In this world, the strong rule the weak, and there is no one stronger than me." Wukong beat his chest with his golden-banded staff. The Buddha's smile didn't fade. "Your skills are impressive, monkey, but the Jade Emperor has cultivated his virtue for over 200 million years. He has endured trials you cannot possibly imagine. You are but a creature born of a stone, a novice who has only just found his way. How can you dare to covet the throne of heaven?" Wukong shrieked with fury. "Don't lecture me. Virtue? Trials? Those are just words. Power is real. I can prove it. What can he do that I can't do better?" "Very well," the Buddha said, his voice as calm as a still lake. "Let us have a wager. A simple test of your abilities. If you can do as you claim, and leap right out of the palm of my right hand, I will personally tell the Jade Emperor to yield the throne to you. Heaven will be yours. But if you fail, you must return to the world below and cultivate yourself for eons more before you bring your grievances here again." Sun Wukong stared. He looked at the Buddha's hand, a normal-sized hand open and waiting. Then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. The sound echoed through the silent hall. "Are you serious? Leap out of your hand? You must be senile. I can cross the entire world in a single somersault. This is the most ridiculous bet I've ever heard. Fine. I accept." He felt a surge of triumph. This was it, the final easy step to ultimate power. He gathered his energy, every ounce of magic and immortal strength coiling in his legs. He was the great sage equaling heaven, and he was about to prove it once and for all. With an explosive crack, he launched himself from the Buddha's palm. He was a golden streak of light, a meteor tearing through the fabric of space. He shot past the celestial palaces, past the silver river of the Milky Way, past constellations that looked like dust motes in his wake. The speed was intoxicating, a physical manifestation of his own limitless ego. He flew and flew faster than thought, faster than light itself. He saw worlds born and die in the blink of an eye. The universe stretched out before him, an endless tapestry, and he was the needle stitching a golden thread right through it. He flew until the very concept of heaven was a distant memory, until all the stars and galaxies were behind him. He pushed on, determined to reach the absolute edge of everything, a place so far that no one could ever question his journey. And then he saw it. In the endless, gray void at the end of all things, stood 5 colossal pillars. They were massive, flesh-colored, and towered up into the nothingness, marking the boundary of creation. This was it, the end of the universe. He landed, cackling with glee. He thought he could hold me in his little hand. The old fool. To commemorate his victory, to leave undeniable proof that he had been there. He plucked a hair, transformed it into a brush, and with a flourish wrote his name in huge characters on the middle pillar. The great sage equaling heaven was here. He admired his work for a moment but felt it wasn't quite enough. A final act of supreme disrespect was in order. He lifted a leg and, with a great sense of satisfaction, urinated at the base of the pillar, marking his territory like a wild animal claiming its domain. His work done, his victory assured, he chuckled to himself, "Now to go back and claim my throne." He leaped back onto his cloud, and with another blinding flash of speed, he retraced his path. The journey back felt even quicker, fueled by the certainty of his triumph. In what felt like less than a second, he was back in the high hall of heaven, landing squarely, and with a smug grin back in the center of the Buddha's palm. "Well, old man," he crowed, "I've returned. I went to the end of the universe and back. Now keep your promise. Tell the Jade Emperor to start packing." The Buddha looked down at him, his expression unchanged. That same maddeningly calm smile was on his face. "You foolish monkey," he said, his voice soft, yet carrying the weight of a collapsing mountain. "You never left my hand." Wukong's grin vanished. "What are you talking about? I flew to the edge of reality. I saw the 5 pillars of the sky. I even left my mark to prove it." "Did you now?" the Buddha asked gently. "Then perhaps you should look down." Confused and irritated, Sun Wukong glanced down at the base of the Buddha's middle finger, and his heart stopped. His blood ran cold. The fur on his body stood on end. There, in characters still wet and dripping, were the words he had just written. The great sage equaling heaven was here, and from the crevice between the fingers, he caught a faint, unmistakable foul scent. His mind shattered. It was impossible. The pillars, the edge of the universe, it was all just fingers. His epic journey, his ultimate display of power, had been nothing more than a crawl across a hand. The cosmos he had traversed was a palm. His entire reality, his perception of his own strength, his very identity, collapsed into a single horrifying point of understanding. He wasn't a god. He wasn't a sage. He was an insect, scurrying in the hand of something so vast, so powerful, that he couldn't even comprehend its scale. For the first time in his life, Sun Wukong knew true fear. Panic took over. "No, it's a trick, an illusion," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He tried to leap again, to escape, to prove it wasn't real. But it was too late. The fingers of the great hand began to close around him. The sky, the world, the universe itself began to fold in on him. He pushed, he fought, he unleashed every ounce of his cosmic strength, but it was like a fly struggling against a mountain. The fingers curled into a fist, and the light of heaven was snuffed out, replaced by an absolute, crushing darkness. The hand then turned, palm down, and descended from the heavens, falling back toward the mortal world below. As it fell, it transformed, the flesh and bone shifting, hardening into stone and earth. The 5 fingers became 5 peaks, a colossal mountain range that slammed down onto the earth, and at its very heart, pinned beneath the crushing weight of reality itself, was the Monkey King. For a moment there was only shock, a profound, universe-altering stillness as the Monkey King, the great sage equal to heaven, processed the impossible. His arms, which could lift the weight of mountains, were pinned. His body, which could withstand the fiercest divine weapons, was crushed. He roared, a sound of pure defiance, and the mountain trembled. He pushed with all his might, channeling every ounce of his cosmic energy, every memory of his rebellion, into one singular effort to break free. The earth groaned, rocks splintered, but the mountain held fast. It wasn't just stone and dirt pressing down on him. It was the weight of the Buddha's palm, the very essence of cosmic law made manifest. As his struggles continued, a flicker of golden light descended from the heavens. The Buddha, looking down with an expression not of anger, but of somber pity, produced a single slip of paper. On it was written a mantra in shimmering gold script, Om Mani Padme Hum. The paper, no larger than a man's hand, drifted down like a falling leaf and settled upon the highest peak of the 5 Elements mountain. And with that, the pressure intensified 1,000-fold. It was no longer just a physical weight but a spiritual one. The golden characters burned with a power that seeped through the rock, binding not just his body, but his very spirit. The mountain, which had trembled under his rage, was now utterly immovable. His strength, his transformations, his immortality, they were all useless. The great sage was a prisoner. And so, his roars of defiance slowly, over agonizing days and weeks, faded into growls of frustration, and then into a long, bitter silence. Time for an immortal is a fluid thing, but for an immortal pinned beneath a mountain, it becomes a cruel, grinding constant. The sun rose and set. Wukong watched the world through the small opening that allowed him to see, to breathe, to exist. He saw the seasons turn. Spring blossoms gave way to the oppressive heat of summer. Autumn leaves fell and winter snows blanketed the peaks above him. He watched generations of mortals live and die. A farmer built a hut nearby, raised a family, grew old and turned to dust. The hut crumbled. A forest grew in its place. He was not entirely alone. The local earth spirits, under heavenly decree, were tasked with his care. When he was hungry, they brought him iron pellets to eat. When he was thirsty, they gave him molten copper to drink. It was a sustenance designed not for comfort, but to prevent his immortal body from decaying, a torment to remind him of his station. He was a prisoner, not a guest. Years bled into decades. Decades stretched into centuries. The dynasty that had feared his name collapsed. New empires rose in its place. The world moved on. The stories of the havoc in heaven became myths, fireside tales told to frighten children. The name Sun Wukong was forgotten by all but the gods who had imprisoned him. For 500 years he lay there. 500 years of solitude with nothing but his own thoughts, his own rage, his own regret. The fire of his rebellion, once a raging inferno that threatened to consume the heavens, was banked, smoldering deep within him, waiting for even the faintest whisper of air to reignite. He had stared at the world long enough to see its patterns, its suffering, its endless cycles of joy and sorrow. The arrogance of the king began, ever so slightly, to erode, worn down by the slow, dripping passage of time, replaced by a desperate, aching loneliness. While the Monkey King languished, a new purpose was stirring in the celestial bureaucracy. The Buddha, from his seat in the Western paradise, looked upon the eastern lands of the great Tang Empire and saw a world mired in greed, sin, and ignorance. He decreed that the sacred Mahayana scriptures, scrolls of profound wisdom that could enlighten humanity and offer a path to salvation, must be brought to the east. But this was a journey too perilous for any mortal. It would cross treacherous mountains, raging rivers, and lands infested with powerful demons and monsters who preyed on the spiritually pure. The task of finding a worthy pilgrim, and guardians to protect him, fell to the Bodhisattva of compassion, Guanyin. She traveled from the west, her journey a mirror of the one she was meant to enable. Along the way, she sought out fallen immortals who could be redeemed through this holy quest. She found a former celestial marshal, banished to the mortal world for his drunken insolence, now living as a monstrous pig demon named Zhu Beiji. She promised him forgiveness in exchange for his service. She found another heavenly general, exiled to a river of sand for breaking a crystal goblet, now a terrifying ogre named Sha Wujing. She offered him the same chance at redemption. Both agreed and waited. Finally, her travels brought her to a great mountain range, pulsing with a strange, suppressed energy. As she drew closer, she heard a voice, faint but clear, shouting from the base of the central peak. "Let me out! Is anyone there? Let me out!" Guanyin descended, her serene presence calming the very air. She found him, a hairy, monkey-like head and 2 arms sticking out from the base of the mountain, the rest of him lost in the crushing stone. His eyes, when they locked on hers, were filled with a wild, desperate fire. 500 years of solitude had not extinguished his spirit. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice raw from centuries of disuse. "I am Guanyin," she replied, her voice like the chiming of a bell. "I come from the west on the order of the Buddha, to find a pilgrim who will retrieve the sacred scriptures." Wukong's eyes narrowed. The Buddha. The name was like poison on his tongue. "What has that got to do with me? Have you come to mock me? To add another 500 years to my sentence?" "No," Guanyin said gently. "I have come to offer you a choice. This holy quest requires a protector, a guardian with immense power, courage, and cunning. Someone who can vanquish demons and overcome any obstacle. Someone like you." A flicker of the old arrogance sparked in Wukong's eyes. "Of course it does. There is no one stronger than me." Then the reality of his situation crashed down on him again. "But what good is my strength here? I am trapped by that old fool's trick." "If you are willing to repent," Guanyin continued, "if you are willing to devote your power not to your own glory, but to the protection of this holy monk, if you are willing to become his disciple and carry his baggage to the ends of the earth, then I will see to it that you are freed." Freedom. The word echoed in the prison of his mind. Freedom to leap, to fly, to fight. But the price: servitude. Discipleship. He, the great sage equal to heaven, a servant to some mortal monk? The idea was insulting, unthinkable. His pride, the very thing that had led him here, rebelled. He looked at Guanyin's compassionate face. He looked at the sky, a patch of blue he had stared at for half a millennium. He thought of the endless cycle of days and nights, the iron pellets and the molten copper. He thought of the crushing loneliness. Was his pride worth another 500 years? Was it worth an eternity? The fire in his eyes softened, replaced by a deep, weary cunning. "I accept," Sun Wukong said, the words tasting strange in his mouth. "I will do it. I will protect this monk. I will be his disciple. I will do whatever it takes. Just get me out of this mountain." Guanyin nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Then you must wait. The pilgrim will come this way soon. He and only he will have the power to remove the seal that binds you. When you see him, call out to him. Devote yourself to him, and your new journey will begin. A journey to the west." And with that, she departed, leaving the Monkey King alone once more. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of despair, but the silence of anticipation. For the first time in 500 years, Sun Wukong had something he had long since lost. He had hope, and so he waited, his eyes fixed on the path below, listening for the footsteps that would signal the end of his long imprisonment and the true beginning of his legend. The sound came not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper, the soft tread of cloth shoes on a dusty path. For years Sun Wukong had heard only the howling wind, the scurrying of lizards, and the maddening drum of his own heart. But this was the sound of a man, immortal. Looking down, he saw him, a lone monk dressed in simple robes carrying a wooden staff. He was young, his face filled with a serene determination that seemed utterly out of place in these savage mountains. This was the man Guanyin had spoken of? This fragile human was to be his master? His savior? A growl of indignant laughter rumbled in Wukong's chest. He called out, his voice a rasp of disuse and fury. The monk, whose name was Xuanzang or Tripitaka, was startled. He followed the sound to the base of the mountain, to the moss-covered seal, and saw the furry, golden-eyed face peering out. Wukong, ever the showman, told a pitiable tale of a foolish immortal who had wronged the heavens and now sought only a chance at redemption. He promised to protect the monk, to serve him with all his strength, to be his loyal disciple on the perilous journey to the west. Tripitaka, a man of infinite compassion, saw not a monster, but a soul in torment. He agreed. He knelt and offered a prayer, and then, following Wukong's instructions, he tore away the paper seal that bore the Buddha's sacred mantra. The moment the seal was broken, the universe seemed to hold its breath. A deep groan echoed from the heart of the world. The mountain trembled, rocks and ancient trees shuddering loose. With a cataclysmic roar that split the heavens, the 5 phases mountain shattered into a billion pieces. Sun Wukong, the great sage equal to heaven, was free. He exploded from his prison, a golden meteor of pure, unrestrained power, laughing a laugh that shook the very firmament. He stretched his limbs, somersaulted through the clouds, and felt the raw, ecstatic joy of freedom after 5 centuries of stillness. But freedom brought with it old habits. After paying his respects to his new master, Wukong's arrogance began to surface. He killed a group of bandits with casual, brutal efficiency, horrifying the gentle monk. When Tripitaka chastised him, Wukong, his pride stung, simply abandoned him, flying off in a rage. This wasn't a disciple. This was an untamable force of nature. But Guanyin had anticipated this. The Bodhisattva appeared to the despairing Tripitaka and gave him a gift, an ornate brocade cap and a golden fillet. She instructed him to trick Wukong into wearing it. When Wukong returned, feeling a flicker of guilt, Tripitaka presented the cap as a prize. Wukong, vain as ever, put it on. The moment it settled on his brow, the golden fillet tightened, embedding itself in his skull. Tripitaka began to chant a sutra, the tightening fillet spell, and an agony unlike anything Wukong had ever known ripped through his brain. It was a pain that bypassed his immortal body, that ignored his incredible durability, and struck directly at his consciousness. He writhed and screamed, begging for mercy. The pain stopped only when Tripitaka stopped chanting. The lesson was learned. This ban was not a punishment. It was a leash, a necessary tool to control a power that could shatter mountains, but had not yet learned the simple virtue of restraint. Sun Wukong, for the first time in his life, was truly bound to another's will. With his first and most powerful disciple in check, the journey began in earnest. Soon, they came to a cloud-wreathed mountain where a foul demon had taken a local girl as his bride. This was no ordinary monster. This was Zhu Beiji, or Pixie. Once, he had been the glorious marshal of the heavenly canopy, commander of the celestial navy. But at a divine banquet, overcome with wine and lust, he made advances on the moon goddess Chang'en. For this transgression, he was cast out of heaven and reborn in the worst possible form, a pig. Now, he was a creature of immense appetite and sloth, a symbol of earthly desire run rampant. Wukong, relishing the chance to prove his worth, engaged the pig demon in a titanic battle. It was a clash of rake and staff, of divine arrogance and earthly gluttony. But in the end, Wukong's skill was superior. Upon learning they were on a holy quest, Zhu Beiji repented and eagerly joined their pilgrimage, hoping to one day regain his place in heaven. He became the second disciple, a constant source of comic relief and a heavy burden, forever complaining and dreaming of food. Their path then led them to the banks of an enormous, raging river, the river of flowing sands, so treacherous that not even a goose feather could float upon its surface. As they pondered how to cross, a hideous red-haired, sand-colored ogre erupted from the depths, wielding a massive monk's spade. This was Sha Wujing, or Sandy. His story was perhaps the most tragic of all. He had been the curtain-lifting general in the Celestial Palace, a position of high honor. But during a festival, he had accidentally tripped and shattered a crystal goblet. For this minor mistake, the Jade Emperor had him beaten 800 times and exiled him to the mortal world as a monster, cursed with a hunger that could only be satisfied by human flesh. A string of 9 skulls hung around his neck, the remains of the 9 monks who had tried to cross this river before Tripitaka. He was a creature of profound sadness and penance. After another fierce battle with Wukong and Pixie, he too recognized the holiness of their mission. Guanyin intervened, and Sha Wujing became the third and final disciple. He was quiet, loyal and diligent, the steady anchor to Wukong's fire and Pixie's indulgence. The fellowship was now complete. The pure-hearted monk, Tripitaka, riding a white horse that was secretly a transformed dragon prince. The brilliant, violent, and rebellious Monkey King, Sun Wukong the protector. The lazy, gluttonous, and lecherous Pixie Zhubeiji the comic relief. And the quiet, dependable, and remorseful sand monk, Sha Wujing the baggage carrier. This strange, dysfunctional family was heaven's best hope for bringing the sacred scriptures to the East. Their journey was a landscape of myth. They crossed mountains that were pillars of heaven and rivers that were fallen sections of the Milky Way. But the real obstacles were the demons. Hundreds of them. Every demon they faced was a living allegory, a physical manifestation of a spiritual poison. They fought demons of lust, greed, anger, and ignorance. They battled monsters who represented the dangers of attachment, the illusion of power, and the poison of a clever lie. Sun Wukong was their weapon, the spearhead of their quest. With his gold-banded staff, he smashed through every obstacle, his 72 transformations and fiery eyes that see through all illusion proving essential time and time again. Yet, his greatest weakness was not a powerful demon. It was his own master. Tripitaka, for all his purity, was still a mortal man. He was naive, easily deceived, and often unable to see the evil that Wukong could perceive so clearly. This conflict came to a head when they encountered the white-bone demon. This cunning spirit, wanting to devour the monk's flesh to gain immortality, disguised herself 3 times, first as a beautiful young girl, then as the girl's elderly mother, and finally as her ancient father. Each time Sun Wukong saw through the illusion with his truth-seeing eyes and without hesitation, struck the apparition down, leaving what appeared to be a human corpse on the ground. To Tripitaka, this was unforgivable. He saw his disciple, his protector, murdering an innocent family in cold blood. He could not perceive the demonic energy, only the illusion. Pixie, often jealous of Wukong, fanned the flames of his master's anger. Despite Wukong's desperate pleas and explanations, Tripitaka's faith in him was shattered. After the 3rd murder, the monk's heart hardened. He wrote a letter of excommunication, declaring that Sun Wukong was no longer his disciple. He chanted the tightening fillet spell one last time, a brutal, agonizing punishment, and then banished him. Broken-hearted, the great sage equal to heaven, the hero who had battled the entire celestial army, was cast out by the one person he had sworn to protect. He flew back to his home, the mountain of flowers and fruit, leaving the holy monk and his 2 far less capable disciples to face the endless hordes of demons all alone. The monk's misplaced compassion had become his doom. No sooner had the Monkey King vanished over the horizon than a new demon, the fearsome yellow-robed demon, descended upon the travelers. Pixie and Sandy, for all their bluster, were utterly useless against him. They were captured in an instant. The demon, amused by the monk's naivety, decided to play a cruel game. He used his dark magic not to eat Tripitaka, but to transform him into a monstrous, man-eating tiger. Chained in a dungeon, his mind still human but his form that of a beast, Tripitaka finally understood the depth of his failure. He had mistaken a demon for a victim and banished his only true protector. His arrogance, his stubborn refusal to see the world for what it was, had led them all to ruin. There was only one hope. With the demon momentarily distracted, Pixie managed to escape his bonds. He knew what he had to do. He had to fly to the mountain of flowers and fruit. He had to swallow his pride, get on his knees and beg his monkey brother to come back. When Pixie arrived, he found Sun Wukong not celebrating his freedom, but brooding. The king was home, surrounded by his loving subjects, but his heart was heavy with betrayal. When Pixie explained their plight, Wukong's anger flared. "Tell the master," he snarled, "that if he doesn't want me, then I don't want him. Let him find someone else to protect him from his own foolishness." He turned his back, refusing to help the man who had so publicly shamed him. Pixie was desperate. He knew a direct appeal to loyalty wouldn't work. Wukong's pride was too wounded. So the wily pig resorted to a trick. "Fine, brother," he said with a sigh. "But you should know, this yellow rope demon is a boastful one. He's telling everyone that he's the one who defeated you, the great sage equal to heaven. In fact, he started calling himself by your old title." The air went still. Wukong slowly turned, his eyes glowing like hot coals. Someone else was using his name? His title? The one he had earned by fighting the entire pantheon of heaven? The insult was deeper than any physical blow. This was no longer about saving the ungrateful monk. This was about defending his own honor, his own legend. In a blur of golden light, he grabbed his iron staff and shot into the sky, Pixie struggling to keep up. Nobody, Wukong roared into the wind, steals my name. He arrived back at the demon's cave like a thunderbolt. The yellow-robed demon, who was actually a celestial star lord from heaven living on earth in secret, was powerful, but he had never faced the full, unrestrained fury of the Monkey King. The battle was short and brutal. Wukong didn't just fight. He humiliated him, exposing the demon's celestial origins and forcing him to flee back to heaven to face punishment. With the demon gone, Wukong reversed the spell, returning Tripitaka to his human form. The monk, now free, looked upon the Monkey King not with fear or suspicion, but with overwhelming shame and gratitude. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and begged for forgiveness. He finally saw Wukong not as a violent monster, but as the living embodiment of the sharp, painful, but necessary wisdom needed to navigate a world full of deception. Wukong, for his part, saw the monk's genuine remorse. He helped his master to his feet. The bond between them wasn't just repaired. It was reforged in the fires of betrayal and forgiveness, emerging stronger and more profound than ever before. With the pilgrims reunited, their journey continued, but something had fundamentally changed. They were no longer a bickering, dysfunctional group. They were a team, united in purpose, each understanding their role. They faced the demon of the Red Boy, whose true Samadhi fire could wound even the Monkey King, forcing Wukong to seek the aid of Guanyin herself. They navigated the treacherous river of flowing sand and crossed the massive mountain of fiery tongues, a volcano that could only be extinguished by a magical fan belonging to the vengeful Princess Iron Fan. They journeyed through the kingdom of women, where they had to resist the temptations of a land without men, and battled the fearsome bull demon king, Wukong's own sworn brother from his rebellious past. For 14 years they traveled. They crossed vast deserts, climbed impassable mountains, and navigated treacherous rivers. They faced 81 trials in total, each one designed to strip away another layer of their mortal flaws. Their greed, their ignorance, their anger, their pride. Finally, after a journey that had spanned a lifetime, they saw it. Rising from the plains of India, bathed in an ethereal light, was Vulture Peak, the home of the Buddha. Their journey was at an end. They were welcomed into the celestial paradise. The air hummed with peace and wisdom. When they finally stood before the Buddha, his presence was so immense, so radiant, it felt like staring into the heart of a star. He praised them for their perseverance and their faith. As a reward, he granted them the sacred scriptures they had sought for so long. An attendant led them to the library and gave them the scrolls. But as they began their journey home, Wukong, with his sharp eyes, noticed something was wrong. He opened a scroll. It was blank. All of them were. They returned to the Buddha, confused. The Buddha simply smiled. This was the final trial. He was teaching them that the highest truth, the ultimate enlightenment, cannot be contained in words or ink. It is an understanding that must be experienced, a truth that is found in the emptiness of a blank page. However, knowing that mortal humans needed words to guide them, he instructed the attendants to give them the true, written scriptures. With the sacred text secured, they were magically transported back to the capital of the Tang Empire in a single day. The emperor received them as heroes, and the scriptures were celebrated as the greatest treasure ever brought to the land. As the final scroll was placed in the royal library, a beam of light descended from the heavens. Their quest was complete. Their rewards were granted. Tripitaka, for his devotion and piety, ascended and became the Buddha of sandalwood merit. Sandy, for his quiet steadfastness, became a golden arhat. Pigsy, whose appetites and desires were never fully conquered but were put to good use, was named the cleanser of the altars, a position that gave him access to all the leftover offerings, a perfect job for him. And Sun Wukong, the stone monkey, the rebel king, the divine prisoner, the faithful pilgrim, he was granted the title Buddha victorious in strife. As he accepted this honor, he felt a sudden lightness, a release. He reached up to his head. The golden fillet, the circlet of control that had caused him so much pain, was gone. He turned to his master in surprise. Tripitaka smiled and explained that the band had vanished not because of some external magic, but because Wukong himself had made it disappear. Once he had achieved enlightenment, once he had truly conquered the rebellious, chaotic monkey mind within himself, the external control was no longer necessary. He was finally truly free. His journey was the ultimate story of transformation. From a creature born of stone and magic, driven by ego and a lust for power, he became a symbol of devotion, loyalty, and enlightened strength. He learned that true immortality wasn't about cheating death, and true power wasn't about dominating others. It was about conquering oneself. The epic journey to the West is more than just a fable about gods and demons. It is an allegory for the chaotic journey of the human mind, the epic struggle within each of us to silence our inner demons, to overcome our pride and ignorance, and to travel the long, hard road from a state of nature to a state of grace. It is the story of the Monkey King who became a Buddha, and the timeless lesson that the most difficult journey is the one we take within.